Notice, someone believed it would be easy to erase you from their memory. They thought all it took was turning their back, walking away, getting lost in distractions. But time, that silent guardian, showed the opposite. Because there is something about you that doesn't dissolve, that can't be buried. They realized too late. The attempts to forget became a burden. Every gesture of distancing turned into a memory, and what seemed to have died continued to pulse, breathing within them. Have you ever felt this? As if a presence crosses through the silence, even when everything indicates absence. It's destiny revealing its strength, showing that some connections can't be broken. And in that moment, they began to understand that fleeing from you was fleeing from themselves. The reflection in the mirror brought fragments of your voice. The songs they swore they would never listen to again chased them down corners. The details that should have been forgotten returned with even more clarity, because forgetting you would be like forgetting air. It would be like denying what sustains life. And destiny, relentless, decided to confront them with this truth. Do you see how this changes everything? It wasn't you who needed to prove anything. It was life that took charge of making the invisible become unavoidable. And what seemed erased surged back like a flame. Notice, what seemed forgotten was not absence. It was just accumulated silence. They tried to silence the memory, to smother the traces, but every time they breathed, you returned. And there was no way to fight against it, because this isn't a matter of rational choice. It's something that transcends will, that breaks through any barrier. They believed they could control their heart as one controls an object. But hearts don't bend that way. And when night fell upon them, when the emptiness began to scream louder, it was then they realized forgetting you was never possible. It's curious how destiny moves. He doesn't rush, but he doesn't fail either. He makes signs, stitches coincidences, opens gaps in time to reveal the inevitable, and that's exactly what happened to him. The more he denied it, the more surrounded he felt. The more he fled, the more trapped he felt, because some people simply cannot be erased, and you are one of them. He discovered this in the silence of the early mornings. He realized it when he thought he had won, but a tiny detail brought you back. A stray word, an unexpected scent, a subtle memory, and suddenly everything became perceptible again. Do you see the irony? He believed you would be a closed chapter, but you were actually the whole book. And no matter how hard he tried to end the story, fate kept the pages open. Then came the restlessness. Because it wasn't just nostalgia, it was an internal recognition, a truth impossible to deny. He began to realize that your absence wasn't a void, but a constant pain. And this pain cannot be healed by distraction. It isn't resolved by distance. It can't be buried by pride. It remains until it is confronted. How many times have you felt that someone carried this inside, even without confessing? It's like looking into someone's eyes and realizing that silence speaks louder than any word. It's like knowing that behind the mask of indifference, there lies a hidden cry. He lived exactly that. He did everything to maintain the appearance. But inside, fate had already won, and what seemed like forgetfulness was in fact a pulsating memory. Have you ever been through this? Share your thoughts in the comments. He got used to pretending he was fine. He laughed during shallow conversations. He recited rehearsed phrases. He built a mechanical routine, as if the emptiness didn't exist. But the truth is that every gesture was a failed attempt to disguise the absence of you. And the more he tried, the more he realized the strength of what he denied. Because it's not just about memory, it's about essence. You are not a photograph of the past. You are the presence that insists on crossing the present. He realized this when the simplest things began to carry your name. A color on the wall, a distant sound, a fleeting fragrance. Everything became a reminder, and it was at this point that his resistance weakened. He understood that it wasn't him who chose to remember. It was fate choosing to reveal. There is something about you that cannot be dismissed, an invisible mark, yet noticeable, a signature engraved deep within him, and the more he tried to erase it, the deeper it became. Have you ever noticed this in someone? When life places before you signs that refuse to let you deny the truth, it's as if the entire universe conspires to reveal what was attempted to be hidden. And so it happened to him. What seemed like forgetfulness turned into a constant memory. What seemed like freedom turned into imprisonment, and what seemed like a decision turned into revelation. Fate confronted him. It showed him that the attempt to forget you was, in fact, the strongest proof that you could not be forgotten, because only those who know the intensity of the mark try to erase it, and he carried that mark, even if he denied it. He discovered that you were not just someone who passed by, you were a root, and roots cannot be torn out without leaving holes. Roots cannot be burned without leaving a scent. Roots cannot be forgotten without leaving pain, and his pain became unbearable. Gradually, he began to yield, not to desire, but to the truth, because fate didn't ask for permission. It simply revealed what had always been there. Do you feel the power of this? It wasn't you who sought to prove anything. It was life that took it upon itself to bring the truth to him, and that truth is simple. Forgetting you is impossible. He didn't confess this out loud, but his whole body screamed. The words he avoided spoke louder than silence. The attempts to disguise it revealed the intensity. And then clarity came. He realized it wasn't a matter of choice. It was destiny. And against destiny, no pride can stand. He tried to convince himself that moving on was the best choice. He told others that he felt nothing anymore, but the body didn't lie. The memories didn't lie. The heart didn't lie. And so each night turned into a battle, between the desire to forget and the inability to erase, between the illusion of independence and the reality that you were an inseparable part of him. He realized that memories are not disposable, that what is born deep inside cannot be buried by distractions. You were in him like a mark, and a mark does not dissolve over time. Fate made sure to remind him of this. It placed signs, reopened wounds, showed him that there is no cure when one attempts to deny the truth, and the truth was clear. Forgetting you was impossible, denying you was unbearable, living without you was empty. He realized that everything he did was merely an escape, but even the escape became a prison, and in this prison destiny was relentless. Do you see how revealing this is? It wasn't you who asked him to return. It was life that pushed him back into what he always knew, that you are unavoidable. He began to understand this when the dreams became persistent, dreams that brought you with haunting clarity, dreams that felt more real than the days, dreams that left no room for denial, and upon waking, the weight was heavier. Because reality couldn't compete with the presence of you in the dreams, it was as if the unconscious was shouting what the conscious tried to silence. He then realized that this was not just about memory. It was fate demanding space. It was life calling him back to the point where everything began. And when destiny calls, there is no resisting. Masks fall, defenses give way, and what is true becomes impossible to deny. He carried this in silence. He didn't tell anyone, but inside him, the storm was growing, and every detail transformed into proof that you were still everything. He realized it wasn't about losing control. It was about acknowledging that there was never any control, because from the very beginning it was destiny. And destiny cannot be manipulated. Have you ever felt this? This force that calls you beyond logic, this weight that cannot be explained, only accepted. If this has happened to you, comment, "I needed to hear this." He noticed that everything he tried to hide came back multiplied. The silence which seemed safe began to speak louder than any word, and every attempt to deny transformed into an even more vivid memory. It wasn't just longing, it was a connection. It was destiny, and against destiny, no argument can withstand. He began to realize that the days lost their color when he feigned indifference, that life seemed meaningless when he tried to move on without you, and that every effort to erase only reinforced the evidence that you were irreplaceable. It was at that point that his pride began to crumble, because it's not about winning or losing, it's about recognition, and the recognition, as painful as it was inevitable. You were an eternal presence. Have you noticed how destiny has subtle ways of manifesting? It doesn't shout. It repeats signs. It insists, until there is no alternative but to see. And that's exactly what happened. He tried to escape. He tried to deny. He tried to rebuild. But in each attempt, there was the same conclusion: nothing compared to you. He realized this when he looked at other people and found no same light, when he sought peace in other embraces but only found emptiness, when he tried to replace you but understood that you cannot be replaced. Destiny was patient yet firm. It showed him that there is no forgetting when there is a soul connection, and a soul connection cannot be severed by distance. It cannot be erased by time. It cannot be dissolved by denial. He carried this in silence, but silence was not enough to hide it, because those who notice understand. And even without words, his gaze was already confessing. It was noticeable. Your absence left visible marks. The sparkle in his eyes faded, laughter became rehearsed, and life felt like mere survival. He realized that fighting against fate was futile, and when he finally surrendered, it was not defeat, it was liberation. Because accepting you was not weakness. It was truth, it was essence, it was destiny fulfilled. And in that moment, everything began to make sense. The pieces fell into place. What once seemed like confusion revealed itself as clarity. What once felt like loss unfolded into a reunion. Have you ever felt that moment of revelation? When life shows you that all resistance was just a delay. When the heart, weary from the struggle, finally rests in the truth. He experienced that. And in that moment, he realized that forgetting you was never part of the story. The story was, and always would be, about reuniting with you. If this touched you, leave a heart comment. He realized that memories didn't need to be summoned. They came on their own like waves. With each passing moment, something brought you back, and no matter how much he tried to ignore it, it was impossible not to feel. It was as if life itself conspired for you to be in everything, in the simplest sounds, in the most ordinary places, even in things that never seemed connected. And this awareness began to erode his defenses, because there was no longer a way to sustain the lie of forgetting. What he was living was the most vivid memory that ever existed. He tried to rationalize it. He told himself it was just habit, that it was just old attachment. But the soul does not accept shallow explanations. The soul knows the difference between ordinary memory and destiny, and inside him the soul was shouting, "You were not the past, you were present, you were inevitable." He realized it was not about a lack of options. Other people existed, other opportunities arose, but none of them had your mark. And your mark was indelible, it was evident even to others. Even though no one could say it clearly, there was an obvious emptiness. An emptiness in his gaze, an emptiness in his laughter, an emptiness that only you could fill. And it was at that point that he began to understand. It wasn't about forgetting, it was about accepting. Accepting that you were part of his destiny, accepting that there is no escape when it comes to truth. Have you ever experienced that moment when everything suddenly becomes clear? When you realize that what seemed like the end was just a pause, when what seemed like a loss was actually preparation for a reunion. That's exactly what happened to him. And the more he resisted, the more painful it became, until he finally relented, not to desire but to truth. Destiny did not ask for permission, it simply revealed itself, and what was shown could no longer be denied. He then realized that you never left. You had always been there, in the depths of every thought, at the base of every choice, at the root of every silence. And when this realization became impossible to ignore, pride fell silent. Resistance dissolved. And his heart finally opened up. Do you feel the strength of this? It wasn't you who insisted. It was destiny itself that decided to prove it. And in the face of this proof, nothing could resist. What he believed to be forgetfulness was merely dormancy, and what he thought was lost was just stored away. Stored for the right moment, stored for revelation. He experienced this revelation as if awakening from a long sleep. At first there was confusion, but clarity soon followed. And the clarity said only one thing: you are irreplaceable. If you've ever felt this, comment, "I've heard that too." Notice, he tried to forget you like someone erasing a name written in the sand. He turned his back, sought distractions, pretended that silence was enough. But destiny was relentless. It placed signs in every detail, reminded him of your name in songs, brought you back in dreams. He realized that it wasn't just a common memory, but an unbreakable bond. Every attempt to deny it only reinforced the truth: you never left him. His pride crumbled, and what seemed like forgetfulness was merely a state of dormancy. Now he understands that it wasn't a choice, it was fate, and fate always finds a way to reveal the inevitable. This conversation doesn't end here. If this touched you, the next video goes deeper. Click now and continue with me.